Okay, can you all see my screen okay? Brilliant.
Yep.
Okay, let's get going then. I'm Kevin Miller, the CEO of LiveCode. We make LiveCode for FM, which is all about redefining the possible and making FileMaker even better. And we do that in quite a number of different ways, which I'm going to run through just now. So the first thing that's really of note is that for the first time ever, you can deploy your FileMaker Go or desktop solutions to the Android platform. We build full native apps on Android that have their own app icon, and they can go into the Google Play Store on that platform. But we also support building for iOS and Mac, and we will very shortly support building for Windows and for web as well. So in addition to our support for Android, what we've done is essentially bring back the runtime feature that FileMaker used to have. Only our runtime is connectable in the sense that if you want to, you can have it connect back to FileMaker Server or FileMaker Cloud. So we let you deploy your apps on all of the platforms that we support at the moment, Android, iOS, and Mac. And as I say, Windows is coming very shortly as well. And that will let you put your apps into the various different app stores. So for example, you can deploy your app onto the Mac App Store or the Windows App Store or the iOS App Store, which gives a really good customer experience because rather than having to download and install FileMaker, you can point your customer to an app in the store and it's all essentially self-contained. You don't have to connect back to FileMaker, but if you want to keep your data just locally and you don't want to have a server-based product, but at the same time, if you want something that does connect back, then all of that is built in and works. We also have the capability to do online and offline sync. This is baked into the very heart of our platform, and it really speaks to the needs that today's users have. So there is this expectation for quite a range of apps that they will handle those moments where there is poor signal, where there's no connection. We've seen this particularly in the construction space and in logistics, but there can be quite a number of different scenarios where you want your app to be capable of working online and then working offline and syncing whenever you get a connection rather than having your app fail to work. And this is a really key piece. If you look at the top rated apps across the two app stores, those apps that handle data sync very well tend to have that mentioned in the reviews, and it's something that's very, very largely expected. And it's something that we have, as I say, baked in to the LiveCode for FM platform. The other thing that you can do with LiveCode for FM is you can manage more users. So FileMaker Server has a limit of about 250 users, WebDirect a limit of around about 100. And that's because those products continuously keep their connection to FileMaker Server open and running all of the time. But because we only make a connection when we actually need to sync a piece of data, the load on the server is a lot less. So you can imagine that we're making a request of the database. We might have a connection open for half a second or for a second, and then it might close again. So we've seen situations where you can get 1,000 users plus onto a FileMaker server. Obviously, it depends on the exact setup and how frequently people are accessing the server, but it makes a huge difference to the scalability of FileMaker. And finally, LiveCode for FM is built on our LiveCode platform, something that David is going to be talking a bit more about, I think, in his presentation after mine. But what it does mean in terms of LiveCode for FM is that it's very easy for us to add custom features to an app which FileMaker maybe doesn't support. LiveCode is a very rich, long-standing development platform which has an order of magnitude more features in it than FileMaker does. So it's very easy for us to add a piece of additional functionality if you need it. And we've already added a couple of pieces for a couple of different clients, including the ability to overlay a video capture on top of a video that's playing, and something to do with background location tracking and getting notifications when the device changes location. Very easy for us to add more things, so come and talk to us if that's something that is of interest. Okay, so I'm going to give you a demo now of how LiveCode for FM works. So just load it up here. So I have the full version of LiveCode for FM here. There is a 7-day trial of this actually available on our website, and in the trial version you only get access to Fast Start, which gives you the ability to build for Android and for Mac. Regular Start also adds iOS as well as the ability to do data syncing, so we don't support that in the trial. You need to get the full version to set all of that up. So I'll go and create a Fast Start project to get going with, and you drag drop your FileMaker solution. So I've just got a very straightforward one, the sample solutions here. Enter your username and password. You have to have full access to the solution when you put in your credentials here, because obviously we have to be able to unlock it fully and get complete access to pull everything out of your project. So we then go into this mode where we're compiling your solution. To just close FileMaker. And for a brief moment, you need to not interact with your computer while we go in and just pull out a couple of pieces of information that we need from the FileMaker solution. Now, if you saw the demo that I did a couple of years ago, this step took quite a bit of time. It took several minutes and blocked your computer during that period because I had to pull out quite a lot of information directly from FileMaker. At this point, we've got this down to really a very short process. So FileMaker, your computer is blocked for really just a minute or so. And there's just that neat little dialog on the top right of the screen there that just says don't touch anything, while it does this initial extract of the information that it needs. So as soon as we come back into LCFM and that dialog disappears, you could now, if this was a big compile, go off and leave this to run in the background. This compile, however, isn't going to take very long. One of the things we are working on, incidentally, if you're using the platform regularly, is the ability to do incremental compiles, which will mean that even if you have a large data set, you don't have to go right back to the start each time you want to do a revision. So you'll be able to get something new out onto your device very quickly and very easily. So when LiveCode for FM has had a chance to look through your solution, it will come up and give you a feature implementation report. The current public beta version that we have of LiveCode for FM supports 88% of the FileMaker feature set. And so what we're doing here is going through and checking your solution to tell you if there's anything that isn't supported as yet. If we have a look at this, it says your solution is 92% feature complete. The first section here is unsupported features. If you look at them, they're features that don't really make sense in the context of a runtime or built app. So they're script steps to open the script workspace, for example. Well, your end users aren't going to be editing scripts, so these aren't features that we plan to support in this category. We then have not currently supported features. Don't currently have the ability to show and hide toolbars, so that's something that you need to make sure that your solution has any of the navigation capabilities in it that it needs. That's something that's coming pretty soon. Then there's a list of partially implemented features, just things that are pretty much there, but there's maybe something that's not quite the same. Then things that are implemented with differences, generally pretty minor differences. You can save out that report, and if you do save that out, then it'll give you a bit more detail and pulls out the user guide entries that are relevant to your solution. So we do our best to set your expectations even before you've seen the app running as to what you can expect to work and anything that might not be going to work. We are adding capabilities and improving it all the time, so that, that feature percentage is going to go up relatively rapidly. So you then come onto the screen. As I mentioned, Fast Start only has Android and Mac in it. Now, as much as a lot of people are interested in this for the Android support, I actually recommend that if you're starting out, you start out by building a Mac app first. And the reason for that is that it means that you don't have to install an Android. You don't have to have an Android device. You don't have to install anything. You don't have to connect it up or go to any additional trouble. You can just see your app running straight away on the Mac. So it comes through, gives us this button to test the macOS desktop app. And after just a moment, it will pop that app up on top of LiveCode for FM. And here is the app running. So just so as you're clear as to what we are running at the moment, this is now a completely separate application. So this is, it's not running in FileMaker at all. It's completely independent. That's just a standard application bundle. There is a setting, in fact, in LiveCode for FM that lets you configure things like the about box information and put in an icon and, you know, get it ready for distribution. And the app is running. It has everything in it that you would expect from FileMaker. It's basically a complete render of the app, and everything looks very much as it should and performs very much as it should as well. So this is a great way just to test how complete your app is in LiveCode for FM, because, as I say, you don't need a device, and if it's running well on Mac, then the chances are it will run well on Android as well, given that it's the same platform that we use across all of the various different devices. So having checked out our Mac app and being happy with that, I'm going to come out there and I will go and add a development profile for Android. So I'm going to add a new deployment profile here. I'm going to add that for Android. You can choose whether you want to build for phone or for tablet. That's useful if you've got different layouts, for example, for the different form factors. If you choose phone, then by default, LiveCode for FM passes in certain pieces of information that you would expect as if you were running on Go. So it will come back and it will say that it's running on Go on iOS if you query what platform that you're working on in a script step. You can change that in the settings so that it does come back with Android if you then want to implement another layer of logic specific to the platform. So you can choose your platform requirements. I happen to know that this app has uses the camera, it uses a microphone, and it uses barcode scanning. It doesn't use location tracking. So I'll turn on those permissions. And that will cause your app to prompt the user at the appropriate point, and very similar way to how it works on iOS, to have permission to access those device features. You can also choose the orientations you support. This is useful if you have an app, for example, that has to always be landscape or has to always be portrait. This particular app works fine in both, so I'll just turn them all on. And then I can choose to test the app on my Android device. I've got an Android device right here. So I'm going to turn on test on device, and it comes up, gives me a target device. Information there about recommended devices. We've done a lot of optimizing, so we now support devices of half the hardware spec that we did a year ago. And let me just turn on this little screen mirroring option. I can just load this up here. You can see this is my Android device now that's being mirrored over Wi-Fi. So if I now hit continue here, should have is the app should come up on the device, which it does, and there it is. It's running as we expect on the device. Now you'll notice that we've chosen here the mobile layouts. If you remember a moment ago, I showed you it running on the Mac desktop, and we had desktop layouts. So there are mobile layouts in the solution, and it's correctly picked those. You can go through and everything is pretty much as you'd expect. So you can, for example, I'll just choose to take a photo, take a quick picture here. Or I can capture a signature. Or use the Android native barcode scanner. And we also have the ability to print a report. So this is just the Android system standard print dialog. It's just set to save as PDF because I don't actually have a printer configured on this particular Android device. And we can also choose to email that report. Yeah. Is that screen sharing keeping up? It's not. Okay. We have an error in my mail client. However, I'm not too fussed about that because that is an error in the mail, nothing to do with LiveCode for FM. So if my mail client on this particular device was working, then it would now show you an email ready to send. But as I say, that is not a bug in our software, so that's fine. I'm happy with that. So that is the app running quite happily on the device, and gives you an idea of the things that you can do. And it really, I mean, pretty much everything on that device is running as you would expect. Little survey here. If you are running through the trial, please do just send us feedback on how your app is running. Always keen to hear back. So that is the basic process of building your app. I'll go back now to slides, and we've got a little bit more information to run through, and then we can come on to your questions. So for those of you that have been following this and who've maybe seen this before, we have completely redesigned and streamlined the app building experience since you saw it last. The fast start mode is new. It doesn't require you to download any additional software to build Android or Mac apps. And it gets the app out onto the device very quickly. You can literally just take an Android phone and plug it in and start testing and debugging with that. Feature report came from the feedback that we've had from people just understanding if there are features that they that aren't supported yet. Lots and lots of features and bug fixes, lots of performance improvements. As I mentioned earlier, we've halved the recommended spec for devices on Android now. There are still areas where we're improving things. There are now actually a handful of areas where we are actually faster than FileMaker as well. So this is just something that we're working on constantly. And there is the public beta with the free trial. And there's quite a good number of apps shipping with the platform. There's 3 of them here that we've been able to get case studies of. I think we'll have some more case studies in production at the moment. So keep your eyes tuned if you're interested to the website. There's the drug guide, which is an iOS FileMaker solution. It's been deployed to Android and listed in the Google Play Store. It's based in Australia, and it's a guide for working with the top 300 drugs for clinicians. And that's an offline app, so it's essentially a full sort of product experience that's built in and self-contained within the app. Now, VCU was somebody that needed to move their iOS app over and prototype and then build something for Android. And MSB is a logistics app making very heavy use of the ability to do online and offline sync because, of course, they've got drivers that go in and out of coverage areas across part of Canada. We have a very active roadmap, as I mentioned earlier on. We have Windows deployment coming up that will be added to the platform over the course of the summer. So remaining 12% of the FileMaker feature set. Support for large data stores. At the moment, there is a limitation in that you need to have enough memory to hold your data on the device. It doesn't affect that many apps in the sense that you probably don't want to build an absolutely enormous app for a device anyway. You probably want to keep a lot of your data on the server, which of course is absolutely fine. But it is a limitation in the platform, and it's one that we are going to lift. Iterative builds for large apps, as I mentioned, just so as you can iterate more quickly. Further performance improvements and bug fixes and web deployment as well. And I do have a sneak peek of the web deployment, which I can just show you very quickly here. So this was built and just using the sort of first prototype, as it were, of our web deployment technology. Nothing that you see here is faked. It has all been built from an actual FileMaker solution. You can see the app running, and whilst there's still things that need to be improved, it is essentially a fully functioning web app. Now, the reason that this is interesting and the way that this differs from WebDirect is that it is all running in the browser. So WebDirect places this really heavy burden on FileMaker server because everything is running on the server and you have to have this constantly open connection back to the server. We, on the other hand, are running entirely client side. So this entire app is just a JavaScript app that is running inside the browser. So there's no server component to this at all. However, whilst it's not implemented in this version, it will use the same online-offline sync to go back and make changes to the server. So that means that you can, for example, turn the Wi-Fi off, continue to interact with the app, and then have connection again, and it will sync the data, and it will allow you to produce web apps that are vastly more scalable, therefore, and just don't have that same limitation in terms of the number of users that WebDirect has. So this is not currently available in the current build, but it is coming relatively soon. I just thought it would be interesting to show where we're heading with that technology. There's a couple of different ways to get started. The first one is the partner program. So if you have an app of sort of moderate complexity, we're very happy to partner with you to make sure that it gets built smoothly or gets converted and compiled successfully. We can do everything from being a structured partnership, where we give you advice on how to use our online-offline sync model, or any aspect of building for any of the platforms that we support. Right through to building your apps and doing QA and testing for you. So if there's something we can do to help, get in touch. We're very keen to work with you and to tailor a program to make sure you can get your app out and be successful with it. The other way to get started is that we do have a free trial version on the website. It's normally a 7-day trial, but we are giving away a 45-day free trial if you sign up within the next 7 days. To the link on the screen, which is filemaker.livecode.com/Santa Clara-trial-offer. If you send us a feature report, if you remember from the demo earlier, I showed that feature report. If you save that out, send that to us, or you send us a partner program inquiry, then we will enter you into a draw to win a Samsung Galaxy S6 at the end of August, when we've completed this tour of user groups. The S6 tab is a really great Android tab. It's got a really good spec, and it's a very good place to get started if you want to be part of the Android journey. So as I say, 2 different ways to get started. If your app's relatively straightforward, you can go and try it yourself. If you want to work with us, then the partner program is there. So that brings me to the end of the prepared presentation. The links are up on the screen there. What I'll do is I'll just copy and paste that link actually into the chat, and I'll stop the screen sharing so that I can come and take your questions.
Well, thanks, Kevin. Back when you were checking off the device feature that you would want to support on the device, like camera or barcode, is there something saved by not checking those?
So you don't want your app to request permissions that it doesn't need. It's kind of frowned on during the App Store submission process. If your app asks for something that it then doesn't use. So it's considered bad practice. I don't know why it's considered bad practice, but it is. So we therefore support choosing.
And then when you're talking about some of the advantages of the LiveCode web that's you're planning on coming out with, would there still be advantages of using WebDirect as opposed to the LiveCode web, apart from the extra cost and all that? But
I mean, I'm not entirely sure. I think there may be. I'm not totally sure what those would be. I think we're trying to sort of
Is it
get
aiming
past.
to, because you said you're doing most of it on the client side, whereas opposed to.
Yes, doing in server side. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, would that mean like normally you would have to download more data in order to accomplish like certain operations, or?
Yeah, I mean, okay, I think that is possibly true. I mean, at the moment, the prototype we have does take a moment or so to load. I think we can get it pretty light. I don't think it's going to be like an absolute ton of data. I think we'll get the overhead down to hopefully a couple of megs just to get the thing up and running. So I mean, yeah, there may be circumstances where even that is too much data. I suppose that is possible. But I think over the long haul, just having WebDirect running because it's that constant link, it's quite uses quite a bit of data itself. So yeah, there might be something. There might be something there. It's hard to say until we finished building the prototype. I can't tell you exactly how small we're going to be able to get it. I mean, it's sort of one of those things getting smaller all the time as we work on it. We're pretty optimistic that we're going to be able to make it pretty lightweight, but you need to give us just a little bit longer, I think.
Yeah.
On that.
I have another question too. Do you do this sort of thing for any other platforms besides FileMaker, or is this the only one you do this for?
So, I mean, LiveCode itself obviously is this multi-platform development environment. So, we have lots of customers that build multi-platform apps with, from the ground up in LiveCode. Comparing to FileMaker, it's a lower level language. There's more coding to do to build your app, but then of course you get more flexibility in terms of the apps that you produce. So it's not really a sort of direct competitor to FileMaker. It's more about just choosing the right tool, I think, for the right job.
No, but
so
what I
in
mean,
that sense.
well, what I
Yeah.
mean was, because you have a FileMaker, I mean, a LiveCode for FM, which helps you produce these runtimes and other things for FileMaker. Is there like a LiveCode for some other platform also, or is it?
We don't as yet. No, not yet. LiveCode for FM was the first branch out in that specific in that respect. That doesn't mean there won't be in the future, but yeah.
And why is that? How did you guys decide on doing this?
Well, for a few reasons. I think because there is a lot of overlap in terms of the sort of user that you get for FileMaker. In that, FileMaker has this reputation for being a very easy to use platform for building data-driven apps, and we are to the programming space what FileMaker is to the sort of more complex SQL database space, where they're sort of easy to use programming tools. So the ethos, I think, of the user base is very similar in terms of the sorts of things, and that makes it a bit easier to hold conversations and to attract attention, I think, in the space. But also, I think there are just really some sort of big, really obvious holes in the FileMaker lineup. Android is 86% of the mobile market. Even in the US, even for high-end devices, it's now just in the majority. And there are countries around the world where you literally don't have any iOS at all. So it's just very obvious to us that they would be a good place where we could add a lot of value. Relatively quickly and effectively, and so that was another thing that kind of encouraged us to look at the FileMaker space.
So what did you think when Claris decided to deprecate the runtime?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people can, we just listened to customers, and when they chose to do that, it seemed like a real opportunity for us to provide that feature. Yeah, I mean, we just we go where people ask us to go, and that's something that we've had a lot of feedback and a lot of interest in. So it's been good to do that.
That's good. And does anybody else have questions?
Yeah, I'll pop in a question. So Kevin, can you comment on like any of the technical challenges with actually, building a Windows runtime? Because, with the LiveCode development environment, it's pretty straightforward to use the standalone builder to, build a Windows app. So what are the challenges here with LCFM?
There aren't that many challenges. There are a few custom things that we've added to the LiveCode platform to support very exactly the same OS feature set. So on the other platforms, so for example, while LiveCode's got a very fully featured AV player, it doesn't work in exactly the same way as FileMaker. So we made some tweaks so that we have an AV player that works exactly the same on Mac and iOS and Android. It's not very much work to recompile that for Windows, but there's just a little bit of effort there, and there's just a bunch of things like that. So in terms of the actual level of technical effort, it's not huge. We're talking a few weeks of engineering compared to the sort of many years that have gone into this project as a whole. But it all has to be done and all has to be thoroughly tested. So yeah, no, not a very difficult project at all, but just something that's just lots of little moving parts that just have to get tidied up. Just little edge cases like things like that AV player. But yeah, it's coming pretty shortly.
Okay, sounds great. Yeah, I didn't know that about the player, but yeah, if you've got to do special work for that, then yeah, you'd have to duplicate that for Windows.
Yeah, there's a few cases like that where it's more been just about making sure that the functionality in LiveCode for FM is exactly the same as FileMaker, and that's just required a bit of engine work, which means that we have to make sure it works exactly the same on Windows.
Well, I imagine Polaris has a bit extra work when they produce for Windows as well, right?
Yeah.
I
mean, it's not a ton for us just because the core platform, as David says, is already.
Well, you've already done the work, most of the work just by doing LiveCode.
95% plus of the work is already done just out of the box, but there are just those little pieces that have to be finished.
Now, LiveCode for FM is a separate product from LiveCode.
Yes, it is. It's a completely separate product. I mean, we're building it with our technology, but it's.
So you would, if you were interested in both, you would be purchasing both of those separately or licensing them separately.
And they really have a slightly different purpose. I mean, LiveCode for FM is really about taking FileMaker and going further with it. So it's about making FileMaker even better. It's about freeing some of the sort of boundaries that you've got and being able to use that as your development platform and as your server platform. But having these additional deployment options. LiveCode is a separate development platform altogether. So that's a slightly different thing. Although David has done some work, I think, to bridge the gap. But very interesting to get his presentation and the recording and see where he's up to.
In the description, you said something about being able to extend the platform with certain sort of script extensions or something like that with
yes,
LiveCode
indeed.
for FM?
Yeah.
What's an example of something like that? Something that you're doing there?
So one of the things that we did very recently for a customer was getting or building a way to actually cause a script to be triggered when the device changed location, rather than having to poll just to get a better performance of the app. And there was a particular problem that customer was needed to solve, which they couldn't do with the built-in method of having to poll for location. So that was one very recently. There was another one also just in the last few weeks, being able to overlay a capture on top of a video that was already playing. I think that was another thing that was custom. But it just depends what you need. We obviously have full access to the OS. One of the things that we're looking at doing in time is giving you the ability to essentially call out to a LiveCode function or a LiveCode, what we call them stacks, but they're sort of little project files.
And all these new script extensions are available to you or to current users?
Yeah, those script extensions are, yes, but the ability for you to kind of roll your own would be if you could actually call something in LiveCode yourself. That is something that we're looking at doing and that we haven't got in the build as yet. That would mean that you could use LiveCode to wrap any kind of OS feature or add a little piece of interactive functionality or whatever, and just kind of insert that little piece into your overall project at compile time.
So in that case, it would be LiveCode FM plus whatever LiveCode can do?
That's correct. Yeah, you'd be able to use LiveCode as an extensions platform for LiveCode for FM. Yeah,
Huh.
and that's something that I think is relatively straightforward. I don't think that's too far off.
Nice.
Any more questions?
Well, Tony White, I'm surprised he doesn't have any questions. He's the guy who does I think he's the one who's a big fan of AppleScript.
Well, there's a lot of similarities between the LiveCode language and AppleScript. LiveCode is sort of a bit like AppleScript, except that it's multi-platform and you can use it to build fully featured scalable apps, including LiveCode for FM. But the language has got some real similarities.
Yeah, I have no questions. I'm enjoying the presentation and multitasking a little bit here. And Kevin, nice to see you. I remember we saw you in New York, and maybe we'll get back together again. Okay, anyway, back to the show.
Okay, any more questions, anybody?
Kevin, I thought I might ask, because some people might be wondering, okay, so you see LCFM is running there on the Mac OS, and it kind of looks like you're probably using AppleScript behind the scenes, maybe to control FileMaker, which is, one of the things that I do. And we've generally thought in the FileMaker community that, maybe 75% of FileMaker developers are on Mac OS and 25% on Windows. But what about a version of LCFM actually running on Windows? Do you have some ideas of the
Yeah,
challenges there?
It is planned, and it might be that you have to. I mean, there may well be a way of driving FileMaker on Windows in the same way, or it may be that we just ask you to export one or two very specific things just before the compile process. But it shouldn't be too difficult to do. Once we have the runtime running on Windows, there's the actual tool itself. I think is relatively cross-platform in terms of the way it's been built. So. It's just that one piece driving FileMaker that we need an equivalent for on Windows. So I think there probably is one. We'll soon find out.
All right, thanks.
Well, I gleaned a few other questions from one of your other presentations. So if nobody else has any questions, I can ask a few of those.
Go for it.
So do the connections to FileMaker Server use FileMaker client license or the data API?
It uses the data API to connect back.
And then, so if it was using a lot of data, then we would want to make sure that we're all caught up in our data for API purchase, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would. I mean, I think with the data API, the way that Claris are moving with the licensing is you need to have enough seats. Essentially, it's very sort of similar to the rest of the licensing at this point. One thing that's kind of worth noting is that it is LCFM is very efficient in terms of the amount of time it spends connected to a server. So it may or may not be the case that concurrent licensing is a good way to go for a good range of projects, just because we only connect very briefly and then disconnect to the server. But that's obviously going to be up to you. But in terms of data usage, I mean, there is a metering on the API, but it doesn't include container data, and it's only downloading data. So the allowance is very generous. So it's very unlikely that you're going to hit it as a limitation.
Good. And then somebody else asked, how are multi-file solutions handled?
You can just drag them. Just fine is the answer. Yeah, there's no problem. Okay. You can include multiple files in the build, and you can do things like choose, the tables and layouts to compile. You can also fine grain things like the sync. You can have it only sync certain tables, or you can set certain constraints that you have a kind of login system or whatever. So, but yeah, no problem at all. We've got some FileMaker solutions with literally dozens of files that are compiling.
And I guess this might be a loaded question, but how is container data stored? Can it be synced to the FileMaker server? Is that all coordinated? Because FileMaker has, the ability to do the external storage and encrypted and all kinds of different ways of handling that.
Yeah, I mean, there's no problem at all in syncing container data. So one of the things that you can choose when you do compile is whether to include the solution data that you have, and the answer to whether or not you want to do that will depend on, if you want all of the data to be stored locally in your app, then you probably do want to include everything. Whereas if you've got a massive server and you only want to pull down certain records, then you probably don't want to include the data in the app at all. You want to just use sync to get the data. We've just added a new feature for containers called deferred containers, which allows you to set a flag on a container to say, don't download this when we do a data sync, but wait until the record is actually on the display. And so that greatly improves the startup performance if you've got a large amount of container data. So rather than doing a huge sync of all of that, you sync the other data, and then that gets loaded just as you go through. So it creates quite a nice user experience. But yeah, there's no problem. I mean, the only thing I would say is that there is still a limit in LCFM in terms of the amount of data that you can store in a solution locally. You can, for example, when using deferred containers, set a size limit on the cache that you download to help kind of not overflow the device. We will be lifting that limit, although, I mean, for practical purposes, you probably want to design these apps if they're going onto a device so they don't have tons and tons of data on the device anyway.
And then well, I assume I guess you probably support most things that are add-ons, but there's a lot of add-ons that are, FileMaker add-ons that are JavaScript oriented, and then there's the web viewer. Are those being thoroughly supported as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, LiveCode had that kind of JavaScript capability in its web viewer a long time before FileMaker did. So there's no problem supporting any of the kind of JavaScript.
Kevin, can you speak up?
There's no problem. There's no problem supporting any of the JavaScript components. In terms of plugins and add-ons, if they're native FileMaker, then they should run just fine. So we know, for example, that MirrorSync works well in LiveCode for FM. So if you already have syncing set up with MirrorSync and you don't want to change it, then there's no reason that you should have to change it. What doesn't work, of course, are native code plugins, because that's completely different. You wouldn't expect those, for example, to run on Android anyway. But that's where our extended script steps and the ability to expand the platform comes in.
Can a plugin writer write a plugin for LiveCode, or can they? Or
in LiveCode itself, they can. At the moment, you can't call it inside LiveCode for FM, but as I mentioned earlier, that feature is coming.
Okay.
Yeah, but you can. I mean, in LiveCode, you can wrap OS extensions, or you can write your own code to do just about anything. It's all built in.
Well, that's all my questions. Anybody else? Well, thank you, Kevin. That was awesome. I mean, it was pretty interesting before, but this is even cooler, especially now that there are definitely a few holes where people were missing things like runtime, and we could see that you're filling that with gusto.
So Kevin, just to be clear, LiveCode and LiveCode FM are distinctly different products, right?
Yeah,
that's correct. Yes, they're different products.
I probably keep saying it the wrong way too whenever I ask a question.
It's fine.
Yeah, I've owned LiveCode for what, 5 or 6 years now. So.
Wait, who's Kirk?
Yep.
Huh.
Cool.
Well, then you're gonna love David's presentation, I think.
Oh yeah. I'm gonna take a deep dive into a little bit of the code on one of my apps, we'll get a chance to see that.
Now, Kevin's volume level was a little low. Yours is a little high, David, I think.
Oh, well, I do have this microphone here. Maybe I should move the microphone just a little bit further away. How's that sound?
Maybe. Yeah, that seems to work.
Okay, good. Okay, so
Okay.
I'm now the presenter. All right. Well, thanks, Kevin, for your presentation.
Thank you all for coming. I'm now going to head off, it being just a bit after 2 in the morning. But David, I will get I'll get your presentation on the video. I'm really curious to see what you have. But thank you all very much. It's been a pleasure to present.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Okay, so let me click here. I guess I need to click on the share button, right? Okay, share screen. Okay. Are you able to see my screen okay?
Yes.
All right, very good. And let me just start the keynote. So I do have a few keynote slides. Whoops, let me go back here. So I've been a very happy LiveCode developer since 2001, almost exactly 20 years. I've been doing business with LiveCode, and I did FileMaker did HyperCard development going clear back to like 1987. I've been a FileMaker developer since let's say 1986. Yeah, that's 35 years. And then I do development for SQL databases, and I have several apps here that I've built. All of my apps are built in LiveCode, and here's a little sample of them, that are in the Mac App Store. They're like, $10 or $20 a piece, and they're like bundles of them as well. But I've just been a tremendous fan of LiveCode and FileMaker. I think it's great to see the two products coming together. It's been a real pleasure to work with Kevin, introduce him to the various people at FileMaker and in the FileMaker community in order to get this project started. Kevin first came to the first DevCon in 2016, and I had the pleasure of taking him around and introducing him to people. That was when we were in Las Vegas and at the Cosmo. So a little bit of housekeeping here, just to tell you a little bit about my products. So FM Pro Migrator in the past has had a couple different versions, a $200 version, $600 version. What I've done is I've simplified the pricing so that all the Platinum Edition features are now available for $99. That's on a monthly subscription, and most projects can be completed in a short period of time. And so this has made it much easier for people to justify spending some money to get a project started, because it's like, well, they don't have to go up to a VP to get approval for $600. They can just start off with $99 and get started, and I'll help them out, of course. So it's very economical for them. Okay, so now I'm going to start with the demo. I've got 3 different things to show in my demos. First thing I'm going to show is this clipboard data test utility, and I'm going to show how you can work with use LiveCode to get what are called private data types off the clipboard. And so that's what this little utility does. And that should be in the links on the posting and on the community. And this is just basically a LiveCode stack file. You can use it with LiveCode Indie Edition, Community Edition, Business Edition. There's no special requirements there for that. And so I helped support the addition of this feature called the raw clipboard data feature within the LiveCode development environment, because I had paid programmers for a number of years to write code in C for me. And I finally got to the point where I said, I'd really like to have this as part of the LiveCode product. That way I can use it and everybody else can use it as well. So in order to spec out that project, I need to build this little test harness app so that I can, see whether I'm getting the correct data or whatever it might be on the clipboard and provide feedback. And so that's what this little utility does. Now, how I even got started working with the clipboard is basically a number of years ago, Todd Geist told me, he said, David, did you know that FileMaker puts a lot of interesting information onto the clipboard? I said, well, no, I didn't know that. And so he gave me a little sample LiveCode stack that I looked at and played around with. And then I, started, coming up with ideas for how I could use this information in order to do things like, let's say I want to convert a Visual Fox Pro application or a Microsoft Access database and convert it into FileMaker. Well, of course, everyone, in the early days, I was only supporting transferring of data between databases. So you can do an access to FileMaker conversion, there's your data, and you have to start over to build your layouts in FileMaker. And so I was able to figure out how to gather the metadata from, for instance, an Access or a Fox Pro database, bring that into my application and turn that into the XML that represents, for instance, a FileMaker layout. And so that's why it's so important to know, for me to know what all these different private data types are that are on the clipboard. So a private data type is one that is really designed just to be used by FileMaker. And that way you don't have to worry about other applications accidentally pulling the information off the clipboard and trying to use it. So if I'm here in this FileMaker database, I switch to layout mode, and I'm just going to copy the entire contents of the layout, and then I'm going to switch back to this little application, and I'm going to click this button that says Get Types, and I found 3 different types of data on the clipboard. Now the PDF and the JPEG would probably be readable by other apps, and maybe the PDF as well. But this one up here, this COM Apple OS type XML2, that represents the contents of the FileMaker layout, and it's all in XML, and this describes all the objects on the layout, except it does not describe the layout parts like the header, footer, subsummary section, etc. But all the objects, the rectangles you see here, the rounded rectangle, the fields, the text labels, all of that is described inside of this XML code. And there are other interesting data types as well. If I come over here and I'm just going to switch back to browse mode, and I'm going to say, well, let's take a look at a value list. And I'm going to just, let's just copy this particular value list onto the clipboard. And once again, this works on Mac and Windows, but the data types will look different on Windows. So here on the Mac, it'll say COM Apple OS type XMVL. So XMVL means that this is the XML representing a value list, and it could be a bunch of value lists. If I go and I select a bunch of them, then copy those, come back here, click Get Types. I still have just one piece of XML, but if you scroll through it, you can see, there's different ID numbers for different value lists, and so it's pulled all of those value lists off the clipboard. If I look at a script, let's go and look at here to the script workspace, and let's just pick an entire script, and I'm just going to click on it and copy it and come back here and say Get Types, and here is the type. So this is an entire script, XMSC. So this is a FileMaker script on the clipboard that my software can do something with. And my software can actually not only read these objects from the clipboard from FileMaker, but it can actually put objects back onto the clipboard in the format that FileMaker will represent, so that you can just paste it right back into your application. Now, another thing that FileMaker gives us the ability to do is to copy a single script step, not just an entire script. So I'll come back here and say Get Types, and this is the type XMSS. So that is a single script step, and that's just the XML which represents that particular script step. Another one that I can do is I can come over and let's get a custom function here, and I can just copy this to the clipboard and Get Types, and then we have the type is XMFN there. So that is a custom function on the clipboard. You can see, the contents of it here in the XML. So
I have a question.
yeah, sure. Go ahead.
The all the XML that you're getting in the clipboard this way, is it look similar, or is it very different from what you would get if you did like a save a copy as XML from using the script?
Well, actually, if you do a DDR, if you export a DDR file, that XML, I've not found it to be as useful or accurate for getting layouts. So therefore, for layouts, I always get that from the clipboard. Now, there's a new XML export feature to export your entire database. And I have briefly looked at that one, and one of the things that I have noticed is it looks like they have the layout parts defined in that new XML format. And I've considered, how I might be able to integrate that into the future. But there's still more work to be done, I think, on FileMaker's side as far as the upgrade tool is concerned. But what I could potentially do in the future is use that new XML file format to import the info into the migrator. For instance, if I'm importing an entire FileMaker database, or if I'm building an entire FileMaker database, I have to step through layout by layout and put the contents onto the clipboard, or take the items off the clipboard and put it into my software. So as the Claris engineering team continues, improving this upgrade functionality, I do expect at some point in time to be able to just produce an XML file and then hand that to the upgrade tool and then have it just build a database from that. I don't think we're there yet, but that's something that would help the process, because you don't have to tie up your machine building, hundreds and hundreds of layouts, you see, at that point.
Interesting, thanks.
So you've got the XML. What do you do with it?
Well, there are two things that I do with the XML. So, for instance, if I am reading a FileMaker database and converting to something else, let's say if I wanted to convert into LiveCode, I parse through the XML and I build objects on a LiveCode stack. Fields, buttons, etc. I read the code from the scripts, and I build scripts for those. I read the information about, for instance, the stored calculations and unstored calculations, and I build libraries for those. I didn't really prepare a full demo of that conversion. I didn't want to step on Kevin's toes, and that would take longer to give that kind of a demo. But that's one way that I use the XML. Another way that I use the XML is what I call database rebuild projects. These are also called table consolidation projects. So sometimes people will come to me and they say, I've got a FileMaker database, it's got hidden corruption in it, and I want to rebuild it. I don't want to have to rebuild it manually. So FM Pro Migrator will read as much of the file as it can by exporting a DDR file and then going through and reading the layouts one at a time on the clipboard. That information is stored in FM Pro Migrator in FM Pro Migrator's project file, which is a SQLite database. And then once I have the entire FileMaker database data inside that SQLite database file, then I can go through the process of building a brand new FileMaker database from a template file that I've stored inside of my product. So I'm starting with a clean file, and then I go through and I build the tables, I build the table occurrences, the relationships, custom functions, value list, layouts, etc. And it's a two-step process because I have to build the layouts twice in order to handle circular dependencies between scripts and layouts. So that's one of the things that I can do with all this XML that I have. Another thing that I can do is on the other side, if I have a Microsoft Access or if I have a Visual Fox Pro project, I have ways of extracting the metadata from those other databases and development environments. I take that metadata, like they have forms and reports in those other development environments. I take those forms and reports, and I know how to read that information, and then I construct XML representing each one of those forms and reports. and I turn it into the XML that you see here for a FileMaker layout. So I know how to build a text label, a field, a rectangle, all these different objects that you see here in FileMaker on the layout. I know how to build those from scratch, and that's what I do. I build those from scratch from whatever my source database is, and then I put that XML inside of FM Pro Migrator. Once I've accumulated enough information to build an entire FileMaker database, then I go through the same kind of process I would do if I were doing a table consolidation project or a database rebuild project. I just say, oh, look, I have this SQLite database file, and I basically step through all of the objects and I build a FileMaker database basically from scratch, having all of those objects inside of it. So that's how I'm able to actually use all of this XML.
So if you modify some XML, you pull out a FileMaker, is there any way to get it back there again?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So for instance, in my software, my files are open, so it's a SQLite database. You can look through the schema. I use a tool called SQLite Manager. You can actually poke around inside of the XML that the migrator has gathered from a FileMaker database or one of these other development environments. You could modify that XML, and then the migrator would dutifully put it back onto the clipboard for you and into FileMaker.
What about security? Like, do you handle the security as well?
No, I don't really do user accounts or anything like that. That's just information that I don't really get. I might theoretically be able to list the names of the user accounts, but I have not tried to rebuild those.
Huh. Or the privilege sets?
Or the privilege sets either. No, there are a few things that they don't try to do. The privilege sets, like you can get a lot of involved info as far as privilege sets. I mean, in FileMaker, we can have privileges down to like the field level by layout, for instance. And I don't try to actually rebuild all of those. And here's the reason, because there's no clipboard XML interface for doing that in FileMaker. I can't just grab that info and put it on the clipboard and have FileMaker do it for me. Now, the way I control FileMaker is on the Mac, I use AppleScript to control FileMaker. And on Windows, I use a tool called WinAutomation. Well, with either one of these methods, the idea of going into the security dialog and pointing and clicking is something that I don't think I'm going to be able to do successfully. This is why it's really great to be able to pull entire blocks of information like value lists and custom functions right off the clipboard or put them back onto the clipboard because bam, FileMaker accepts it and slurps it right in and we're done in a few seconds. So someday, if we have more functionality there, then I might be able to do that. That would probably be this XML functionality of being able to, rebuild a whole FileMaker database from XML. I mean, this concept has been talked about in the FileMaker community for probably more than 10 years of this concept called round trip XML of, we'd like to be able to export the entire database and then basically rebuild the whole thing, from the XML. We're not there yet, and there would still be a lot of work that I'd have to do also because, obviously it's changed along the way. For instance, I don't think that I would be able to take, well, in fact, there isn't any way that for FileMaker to, that I know of, for FileMaker to be able to handle the layout parts on the layouts. Definitely doing it on the clipboard doesn't work. FileMaker doesn't recognize layout parts on the clipboard. If you're in FileMaker and you're copying, from one layout to another, you're not going to get layout parts.
That's a big disappointment, actually.
Right. And so you just have to do that on your own. And I think someday that we'll probably get there. The engineering team, with their agile development is doing a lot of work, and there's obviously more work to do, but we're seeing progress continuously. So
all this XML that you discovered, is there any kind of documentation that tells you how to interpret everything, or do you just have to figure everything out?
No, you just have to reverse engineer it and figure it out. That's what you have to do. And some things, sometimes you have problems and it's like, gee, I wonder why that doesn't work. And if you really mess up things, Well, you have to be careful. Like if you mess up things badly, you'll crash FileMaker. Because remember, these are private data types, and so I have to be careful to make sure that I don't mess up the XML. Make sure that I'm dealing with Unicode properly. And LiveCode does have full support for Unicode, and because if you don't, you can crash the database because FileMaker is just going to take whatever you put on the clipboard and it's just going to accept it because it thinks that the information came from itself. So it's not really going to do any bounds checking on it. It's just going to say, oh look what I got. And so if you're not careful, yeah, you can cause problems. And I don't know of any open problems right now, but that certainly can happen.
Hey, David, Tony, I have a question. So I like what you're doing here, and so I have a question. You said earlier, so what you're doing is using a mixture of the FileMaker objects that have been made available to the clipboard, plus, as you mentioned, Apple script. So I'd imagine you're doing some system event scripting.
Yes, that's exactly right. In fact, I make all those scripts available for free to anybody who wants them. So when people download my software, you can actually select, if I go here in the migrator, and I can export Apple script or Win automation scripts. And so basically, if you export those, then you'll get all the source code for my Apple script code so that you can see how I did it. So I don't make that a secret.
So, I mean, that's very cool. Many years ago, we did a product script, called it Script Building Blocks, and it was floating palettes that made use of, stored XML, so people could just click buttons to add script steps. It didn't sell very well, so I just went on to custom development. But this is, we've been doing some of this stuff internally. What we do is very specialized, not very productizable. But that said, you mentioned table occurrences, so it sounds like you've sorted out the user interface for the relationship graph. If you're creating, did I hear you accurately that you're actually creating table occurrences on the relationship graph?
Yes, I do that with AppleScript. So on the Mac, I use AppleScript to recreate the table occurrences. So when I import from another database like Access or Fox Pro, I have to build a table occurrence, and I'll build as many table occurrences as I need. And then on the Mac, I will use AppleScript and Pro Migrator to step through and build all those individual table occurrences. And on Windows, I can do that as well, build the table occurrences. On the Mac, I can also use the Apple script in order to build the relationships as well. So I can pull those out of other databases and actually build relationships for them in FileMaker. On Windows, the user interface has changed to the point where I cannot automate the clicking of various objects in the relationship dialog on Windows. That happened starting around FileMaker 13 or 14 or so. And so I no longer build relationships on Windows. I can still do it on the Mac, and that's what I recommend is if people need to build relationships, that has to be done on the Mac side of things. And yes, I have AppleScript in there. Because what LiveCode is able to do, LiveCode can run JavaScript. So you can have a blob of code that's either JavaScript or AppleScript, and you can tell LiveCode to run this block of code as AppleScript or as JavaScript, and it will go ahead and dutifully run it for you. And so that's what I do inside of my application, so that from the user's perspective, it looks pretty transparent. Things, Windows just open, close, and things happen, and it seems, that it's nicely automated. But yeah, on Windows there are a few challenges there on relationships.
So, I mean, that's very impressive, the relationship graph and being able actually to attach the table occurrences to each other. And I'd imagine that you're even scrolling down to get the right keys on each side.
Well, actually, I read info. If it's a FileMaker database, what I do is I will read information about the table occurrences and the relationships. Yes, I read the information about the keys. I have the entire relationship because I can read that from the DDR just fine. And I read that info, and I store it here. There's nothing here because this particular project does not have any relationships. But basically, I store all that info so that I can rebuild each one of those. And originally, I would only do, originally I was kind of limited, but like on value lists and relationships and things like that. But I can actually build, of course, it's easy. It's easy with, for instance, a value list, because that's all just, a blob of stuff on the clipboard, bam, it builds them all. Relationships, I have to go and build each and every individual relationship, and I have to select and build, it's
Yeah.
like this equals that, this equals that, this equals that, okay.
That's a lot of
done.
user interface scripting. That's pretty
Yes.
impressive.
Yes,
The
yes.
one other thing was mentioned the accounts, and I would do the same thing as like stay out of the security zone. The accounts, I will, I always like to give a shout out to what the FileMaker engineers gave us with the account management script steps, the 6 different things. And, it's not the most complicated thing. It's native FileMaker to add accounts across multiple files.
Oh,
So
actually, yeah, that's a
yeah.
good idea. I mean, since my app runs outside the database, I don't have the opportunity to do that. I could theoretically, well, let's see, what can I do? Well, I can build scripts out of thin air and put them onto the clipboard to go do stuff. And I do that like for the table consolidation projects. I do like import scripts because, okay, you're doing a table consolidation or rebuild project. You kind of like to automate the importing from the old database to the new, that kind of thing. And so I build those scripts out of thin air and put them on the clipboard. And you may indeed have to modify them, but at least I've given you a good starting point. So yeah, I guess that could be done. Is I could theoretically. Okay, I guess what I could theoretically do is I could probably read the names of the accounts out of the DDR. I think it probably gives us the names. I doubt that it gives the passwords. I haven't really looked
Yeah,
at
I
it.
mean, I think drawing the line and keeping out of the security and the privilege sets are a hairball. I mean,
Yeah.
we do some
Well,
user, we
but
do some.
oh, sorry. But the privilege sets, though, and my least favorite thing is you create a new object, and you want everybody to have access to it, or most of these people to have access to it. And so you have to, if you have a lot of granular privilege sets, and you have to go through in and out of each and every one of those to go give everybody access or not give them access, as the case may be. And that part's kind of tedious because you can't work from the object level and say, give everybody access to this, or give everybody but this person access to that. You're going through all the privilege sets one at a time, which is, if you had like a table or something like that, you could just go zip, just give all these people access. That's kind of my issue with the security and the privilege sets.
Well, setting up what we do, we actually did the user interface scripting to add 10 privilege sets. We purposely stayed away from drilling into the field level stuff. We just did kind of the top level, the checkboxes that were visible on the first screen, because you can drill
Right.
down 3 or 4 screens, and the user interface scripting for that would
Oh,
be very, very, very difficult.
yes.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, because it's not very fun for the user to do manually either, right? So,
Well, it depends. It depends on how you're. I mean, security is tough, and if you want granular security, you're going to have a lot of very, very specific. This field can do this. This layout is accessible. I don't think there's an easy solution. I mean, we drew the line in terms of how much we were going to do. But that said, you could do what we did. I'll just say it. We picked 10 privilege sets that cascade from full access, or not, that full access down to admin to power user to user to, layouts, read only or whatever. There was like 10 of them, and we just lay them down as like a basic starting point. But it's the starting point. Someone could then go in and tweak them as needed. It's just not an easy problem to solve until,
Right.
I mean, ultimately the roadmap, which I'm excited about, that the FileMaker engineers are making huge progress. You can see it to get the round trip XML. I mean, you can see the pieces fall into place. They started with fields and script steps and layout objects and fields and tables, and then they added custom functions, then they added value lists, then they added custom menus. You know, they've been busy. I
Right.
wouldn't mind having table occurrences in relationship graph, but hey, anyway, that's cool what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
David, I have a question.
Sure.
I've got a project on my plate right now that you might have some tools that could help with.
Mhm.
It's a 16-year-old database with about 25 million records in it, and it's been branched to 4 different business units. There's 270 tables and about 1,674 table occurrences, all in a single file.
Wow.
And I need to get that into a split file structure so I can do a common UI between multiple business units.
Okay, so you want to take you don't want to take multiple files and combine them into one. You want to take one file and split it into several, right?
Well, actually, one file and split it into 2 because there's 4 discrete instances of this running, one in each business unit. So I'm not worried about the other 3 business units at the moment. If I can get one of them split, I can use that UI file against the other business units and get them and do one code base across.
Right. Well, unfortunately, I don't have any kind of a splitting feature. I'm not completely certain exactly how I might approach that.
I
Because
have some AppleScript that's very close to working, but I'm not an AppleScript expert, so I'm having some difficulty making it play.
yeah, it could be indeed. See, in my software, I have a database, and the question is, if I were to take a single file and want to split it, how might I do that? You know, where do I want the split to occur? How do I tag the records in such a way that I know, oh, this goes into this file and that goes into that file, you know, that kind of
No,
scenario.
it's just 2 files, a UI logic file and a data file, period. End of story.
Right.
Yeah. You'd have to flag it, and you'd have to flag the right thing. If you flag the wrong thing, you end up dividing it the wrong way, then it's not going to work, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Be easier if you're starting with anchor buoy, that's for sure.
Oh, it is anchor buoy, but you still have to touch every table occurrence and point it to the new data file manually. And that's
Yes.
1,674 times. And
Right.
you have to cut and paste the name of the table occurrence because the minute you click on it, it replaces that table occurrence name. So you got to copy it, click on it, paste it, do it.
Right. Yeah, that's
So what if you just duplicated the whole thing and then just somehow flagged or chose what you wanted to get rid of from it? I don't know if that works either. So, yeah, never mind.
no, he's still going to have to do the same thing. He's still going to have to point, you know, file number 2 to file number 1, or, you know, whatever the case might be. Yeah. I unfortunately don't have a solution to that. I think that when we get more of these automation tools, you know, like we're talking about the round trip XML, I think that there will be, you know, a better opportunity to be able to produce a tool like that. Because, you know, if we can get the entire XML for the entire database and get FileMaker to slurp that in and do something with it, then it's a matter of programming to say, oh, okay, I can read the XML. Oh, let me just change these keys of the XML from this to that, and boom, I'm done. You know, that kind of thing. And just get FileMaker to import it to do whatever it you know, needs to do to build the objects. We're not there yet.
Yeah, I'm just not looking forward to the pain and suffering.
Right, exactly.
So we got about 10 more minutes.
Oh, 10 more minutes? Oh, okay. Well, let me, well, good questions, you know, and I'm glad to have lots of good discussion. I wanted to show you briefly, for those who already know something about LiveCode, you know, this is basically a button, and you know, how am I getting the data off the clipboard? Well, the first thing is I'm locking the clipboard. Whenever we work with the clipboard, we need to lock it first. I'm clearing a field that stores this list of data types. And then this is the command: put the keys of the raw clipboard data into this variable, clipboard types. And then I just take that data and put it into that field. This field is one that in LiveCode is configured as a basically a list behavior type of a field. So when you click on each item, then the items will highlight. And so that shows you just a little bit about how that is working. And I'm going to show you, for those who might not know, just give you a quick overview. When I when I build a little tool like this for myself, I will usually build it as a standalone because it's easy. Just like if you were in FileMaker and you were in layout mode, if you click a key someplace, you might accidentally delete something. Well, if you're here in LiveCode and you're in the edit mode, which is this one, and then you click some key on your keyboard, you might delete an object. So I like to build a standalone app. So this is the standalone builder for LiveCode. So, I can build for Mac, build for Windows, Linux, iOS, Android, etc. This particular command is the clipboard data command. Getting the raw clipboard data works for Mac, Windows, and Linux. It's not this clipboard functionality is not intended for mobile devices. And but anyhow, you would just go here. You would set your settings. You would set your icon if you wanted. Set your comments, and then from there, you would basically go up here and you would say save as standalone application, and it would prompt you. I'm not really going to save it. I'm not going to build another one. But basically, this is how you would build for one or multiple platforms. And just so that you know, if for those of you in the audience who might have just downloaded LiveCode for the first time, that's how you build yourself a standalone. So, Eric, you said I've got probably about 8 minutes left now?
That's about right. And then
Okay. Because we've had a lot of really, really good questions, and I love the questions. So, at this part of the demo is I am showing how to do the SQL Server to FileMaker conversion that you were asking about, Eric. And so what I've got running here on my computer is I have a Docker container that's running Microsoft SQL Server. I have this tool called Navicat Premium, which lets me work with all kinds of SQL databases. And then I've got ODBC Manager from Actual Technologies, and this is how, and I have the Actual Technologies ODBC drivers here. And I have created ODBC DSNs for each of these databases for both SQL Server, and so this is the SQL Server DSN, and then this one is the FileMaker DSN, and so that I can talk to both of the databases. And if I go to, let's see here, I'm just going through my slides here and double checking where I'm at. Okay, so what I've done is I have configured FM Pro Migrator to have SQL Server as its source database and FileMaker 19 as its destination database. These are the two DSNs, one for each database. This is the login info for FileMaker. And then this is the database information for SQL Server. So the name of the database is test, and my username is SA. Now, I'll just tell you, in general, your IT department is not usually going to give you the SA account. They'll give you a non-privileged account, and maybe they'll give you like a read-only account. But what FM Pro Migrator does with SQL Server to gather this info is if you give it the SA account, it can go through all the different schemas and get a list of all the different tables. If it is a non-SA account, then it takes the name of the account that you've given it. Let's say you've given it account user 1, then it will go in and get information from the information schema and say, give me the list of all of the tables for this particular schema named user 1. So there is a differentiation between logins versus schemas. So Eric, if you end up doing this kind of a project, your IT department, you might need to create a login for you that exactly matches the name of the schema name where these tables are located. You can't just assume that that's the case. So why do we use schemas? We use schemas on large SQL databases in order to separate the tables. You might have thousands of tables in the database, many different users, and so you want to be able to organize them, and so you organize them under schemas basically. And so that's how that works. Okay, so what I'm going to do here now, I'll just let you know I've had some challenges with this feature, and I've actually found 3 bugs, and I fixed 2 bugs over the last couple of days. So in preparation for this, thank you, Eric. You prompted me to go in and look at this feature. I've had this feature for a number of years, and not very many people have asked for it or used it. And I did correct a couple of problems. There's a third one that I think I'm going to have, and we'll just see if that happens. So I'm going to click the button here for Get Info. The migrator will go out, use ODBC to try to talk to SQL Server and get the information. So let's just see what happens. Okay, it got the information, and the migrator ended up opening a brand new FileMaker database. So I used AppleScript to do that basically. Hey, here's a database. What the migrator did is it made it a template, an empty template database, so that we have a place to put the tables. And if I go back here to the migrator and I click the continue button, then I see these 3 tables. Now the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to click this button, which is copy all tables to clipboard. All of these buttons in the migrator have tooltips associated with them. And so you can see it says copy all tables to clipboard. So I'm going to click that, and the migrator is going to open FileMaker with AppleScript, open Manage Database, and then all the user has to do is click Paste, and there are my empty tables in FileMaker. And of course, you can see them right here. I'm just going to put them in list view mode, and so that we can actually see the data when it comes in. And now I'll go back to the migrator, and I'm going to just basically at this point work on transferring the data. So I have this one table called companies. So let me go here and just going to click on this, see if I get an error message. And okay, yes. So this is some kind of a problem that I have that I need to resolve, but I can work around it. So I need to double check the username, password info that I have put in here. So let me just do this. Let me go over here and verify what I've got for username and passwords. And then, okay, I got my databases, and let me just double check and see if that works okay at this point. And nope, okay. So let me go back and make another change here. And so I'm going to go to, just pick another one, and then we'll pick this one, and just verify SQL Server. Still got that set. Okay. And okay, now this got changed. So, all right, now let me click on the transfer data, and oh, it still doesn't like it. Okay. So let me go back and just verify that it did right. Oh, that's why this got changed. And so now let's just see. Okay, there's the data. So I have data for the company's records, and now I'm going to click on members, and I'm going to click on that here and click transfer data, and it's transferring those records. And one of the things I'd like to point out is this particular record has Unicode data in it. We see Unicode data here in Navicat, and that Unicode data has been correctly brought over into FileMaker, which is what we want. And then this is the last table, and that information got brought in as well. And so that is it in a nutshell. And let's just see if there was anything else. And that was it. I won't have time to do, if we need to stop at 7, I don't have time to do the last part of the presentation where I was going to give you some in-depth look into LiveCode. But we've seen a little bit of the scripting. We've seen how to work with XML on the clipboard. And you've seen with a few problems, I was able to get data directly from SQL Server and bring it into FileMaker. That last bug, I need to figure out why my privilege set information, my login info is not correct when I'm doing the data transfer part of the process. But anyhow, that just shows in a nutshell.
So that was just a matter of manually going back in there and fixing the login information, correct?
Yes, you as a user should not have to do that. So that means that I have a bug that I need to track down where it's pulling from the wrong place, and so I need to troubleshoot that.
So this product, was that the pricing you were showing at the beginning? That you said that was $99 a month?
Correct. Now, as my idea is that users use my product as a project-based software. So they have a project. Like, for instance, Eric, you might have to do a one-time transfer of data from SQL Server into FileMaker, bring it into FileMaker, and then from that point forward, you would be doing your development and have all the data permanently in FileMaker. So you would only need my product for a short period of time. And so once you complete your project, then you would just cancel your subscription. That's the idea. You don't have to keep it indefinitely unless there's certain features that you require. What I didn't show is, in fact, I can just briefly explain that I do have a batch transfer tool, and think of this as like a poor man's version of MirrorSync or one of the other great tools that are out there. And if a person licenses the migrator either monthly or on an annual basis, then I license them to use this batch transfer tool. And I have people who use it in order to, let's say they want to do a project there where they want to convert from Visual Fox Pro into FileMaker, but they want to update their Fox Pro data on a regular basis so that they know that they're developing with a current copy of the data. And so the migrator is able to read DBF files directly, including memo fields. FileMaker's DBF import apparently is not able to read memo fields. At least I've not been successful in getting it to do that.
What is a memo field?
A memo field has more than 255 characters in it, if I remember correctly. So it's a larger text type of field that DBF files can have, and it may contain quite a bit of valuable information which you wouldn't want to lose. And I'm kind of curious. I don't have an M1 Mac anymore, but I'm kind of curious if Claris is even supporting the DBF import with the M1 version of FileMaker, because I'm not sure, how they're reading DBFs. Did they write that code natively, or are they using something else that they have licensed from somebody? I don't know. And so I was just kind of curious whether FileMaker is able to even read DBFs, because that's pretty old file format. But anyhow, with this batch transfer feature, people can transfer data on a regular basis without spending like $2,000 to $6,000 to set up some of the other synchronization features that are available. They're very, very good synchronization features that are available with SQL databases in FileMaker. And if you really need, fine granularity, then you definitely want to use those. This little tool basically truncates the tables in the destination database each time it runs, and then transfers all the data each time. And if you're just doing development, that may be perfectly okay for you, and that's why I want to make it available for a very economical price.
Nice. Good. I mean, offer it at that price, it sounds like a fair number of people are looking for it.
Well, yes, you see, it used to be a real problem, getting people, they'd have to go up to like a VP level to get to spend $600. Well,
Yeah. Especially for government, it gets
right.
more challenging.
For $99, I mean, departmental level, people can say, oh yeah, I can order that. And so the way you use subscriptions is you subscribe when you need the software and you cancel when you're finished. Sometimes I do have Fortune 500 companies who just keep it running and they forget to cancel. That does happen.
Yeah.
But the way I intend for people to use the software, and by the way, something like a good percentage, typically in most months, 80% of my revenue is renewals, and that's very, very good from a software standpoint, software business standpoint, because yeah, it's true. I have new sales coming in. I have people who are finished with the software and they cancel, and then I have new people coming in. So having a subscription level business is very good for business, and yeah, like you say.
Is that why Claire's did it?
Oh, pardon?
Is that why Claire's got onto that?
Well, no, I took the idea, I was really late to the game because, I generally don't like to buy subscription stuff. I like using the Affinity software, but I still do subscribe to Adobe Dreamweaver because I have to, and I have no choice. But I have every one of the Affinity packages because I like just paying once. But basically,
Well, yours makes the most sense of anything that I've ever used because, well, like for FileMakers, like we don't plan on not using it next year, so why would I only want a subscription?
Right.
I mean, once we get it, it's like then we don't have to worry about because with government too, you're dealing with the budgeting and purchasing can be a really arduous thing. It's like you don't know if they're going to pass the budget in the state or something like that next year, and we're going to be like 6 months late on our payments, or who knows what's going to happen, right? So we stayed away from that as much as we could because it's just once you're bought in, you at least you can keep on using it,
Right.
Even if you go out of maintenance, at least you're not hung out to dry for some reason.
Right. Yeah, but that's one of the interesting things that I figured out. For many years, I mean, I resisted, for many years, I resisted doing license keys, but then I added all these amazing features. I said, I've got to charge more for this. I've got to do license keys. And then, I just cannot sell everything for the same price. And then I finally come around to the point where, it really is a big benefit to the customer because this is project-based software. They subscribe when they want it, do their project, and then they cancel. And simple as that. And so real easy for them to do, and they don't have to come up with a huge chunk of money up front.
Well, thank you, David. I don't know if there's any other questions before we leave. But yeah, you're like this is like real under the hood stuff. Like
Oh yeah. Well, there was even more, but we've run out of time. But we had such great questions. I really love it when people ask lots of questions, because I could have gotten even more under the hood with with LiveCode. Yeah, by the way, those two of those apps that I show in the Mac store, the printer maintainer and the screenshot toolbar, this one right here in the middle, and the printer maintainer, I distribute those on the Mac App Store and also on my website. When they download it, customers actually get the LiveCode stack. I mean, they're $10 a piece, or $20. I'll sell you a whole bundle of everything I make on the Mac App Store. So basically, if you want to dig in, you're curious about a production app and how I do preferences with JSON files and things like that. Both of these two apps that you see here on this particular screen offer that functionality, and I provide the source code to you, and so that you can just poke around and see how I build something.
And the one that's specifically FileMaker related is the one on the right there, the FileMaker FM Pro Migrator.
The one on the right is the FM Pro Migrator batch transfer app, and this one I don't provide the source code to, and this one actually uses a feature in my software where I actually build for some conversions, like the one we just did here. I build a compiled Perl application. And with that compiled Perl application, I can transfer data wherever I need to, because LiveCode does not read DBF files natively, but Perl is able to. I've been able to put together enough libraries and build compiled Perl apps for back-end Windows that can read DBF files. And so I basically use that functionality of this little compiled executable, and I arrange them in folders, and then this little app will cycle through the folders. Well, what happened is this little app, you launch it and a countdown timer starts, and then it will cycle through all of the different folders and transfer the data from point A to point B, and then it quits when it's all done.
Oh, thanks. Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Well, Good night, everybody. Everybody else.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Very nice.
You're welcome.
Thank you and good night.
Thanks
Good
for the
night.
show. See you tomorrow, LA.